Welcome to On the Fly College Edition, a podcast presented by Playfly Sports. I'm your host, Gene DeFilippo. Playfly Sports is the full-service marketing and media company bringing digitally enabled innovations to the sports industry. Our guest today is Joe Castiglione, the Director of Athletics at the University of Oklahoma. Joe is certainly one of the top athletic directors in the country, but more than that, he is one of the leaders in intercollegiate athletics on so many different fronts. Joe, welcome to On the Fly podcast.
It's great to be with you. And I can remember back so many different opportunities we had as colleagues and friends to be together in so many settings. I bet you we could do about 10 of these podcasts and tell stories.
Oh, some of the stories would be absolutely great. I think we'll get to some of the stories, but some of the things that you did when you were an up-and-comer at the University of Missouri are some of the funniest stories I've ever heard. I've heard them many times, but as you know, I make you tell them again to people because they're that funny. You know, you started out at Maryland and then went to Rice and then on to Missouri. You've had a great career. Take people through the steps that you went through, because we've got a lot of associate ADs out there, young people that want to be like Joe Castiglione. Take them through what you went through.
Gene, you know, it's really kind of interesting just from the standpoint that when you and I came up, there really weren't many role model type athletic directors. Now, there were athletic directors, but in our formative years, many of those positions were held by people who were given that as sort of a retirement job. And, not that they weren't good people and not that they didn't do good jobs, but they came from coaching, which is, very, very great path. And so they were obviously good at relating to other coaches because they had walked in those shoes, former players, because many of them played the sport they coached. In this world that we've been in the last probably 20 to 30 years, it's been completely different. And I remember starting out, Gene, when people didn't really want to use the word business around college athletics. Yet on the administrative side, it was all about business, not necessarily in the traditional sense of profit and loss, but trying to use business acumen to run an efficient operation that could fund most of itself, if not all of itself. So when I think back, I didn't grow up thinking of getting in this business. I actually grew into it during my time at the University of Maryland. And I took the opportunity to do something on the fly, no pun intended to this podcast, but getting into it through sports marketing. That was a brand new type of area for college athletics. And I was fortunate at Maryland to work in the athletic department as a student in the area of sports marketing. And they were only one of 3 schools in America that were attempting to do something in this area. So I thought I had, something unique to offer. And most people didn't understand it. And I found that out by all the letters that I wrote. But one did, and that was the AD at Rice University. And I got a job interview in April of my senior year, got the offer after the interview, graduated in May, and started July 1 working full-time at Rice University and been working full-time ever since. I was there for about 17 months, went to Georgetown University, and I was there for a year. And then Missouri came calling, and they were trying to start a sports marketing program and wanted to hire their first ever marketing director. And I got offered the job and took it. Thought I had moved too many times in the first few years of my job. I didn't want to be known as somebody who couldn't hold down a job or a job hopper. So I thought I better stay there maybe 3 to 5 years. Well, that turned into more than 3 to 5 years. I was there a total of 17 years, but the last 5 of those I was Missouri's athletic director. Wasn't looking to leave Missouri either. And then Oklahoma came calling. And now I'm in my 24th year at the University of Oklahoma. And, in this job, Gene, you never take any year for granted. So I try to just do the very best I can year to year and putting the people I'm responsible for in the best position to be successful.
Well, you have certainly done that, as you've had tremendous success at Mizzou and now at Oklahoma. So you're doing a lot of things right. Hey, Joe, what advice would you give to a younger Joe Castiglione at the start of your career?
Be self-aware and keep an open mind. I find many young aspiring athletic administrators, trying to get too perfect, too specific, thinking they're just going to step into this field with a big title, and they get discouraged when it doesn't happen. Now, and I think back to where I was just hoping to get a job, any job, just a foot in the door, was willing to do anything. And so when I think back in the way my career path went, I don't know that I would change anything. I actually think some of my experiences helped shape me, and they weren't all good. Sometimes you think about what you're supposed to be doing. And my younger self, Gene, those early years, I didn't have the full grasp, and that's where I say self-awareness. I was flexible, I was open-minded, but I wasn't really fully grasping what my role was. I think I pushed hard to do the what and not as much for the why. And then a switch flipped, and I realized what being in college athletics is all about. And it might be somebody working in a business office, it might be somebody working in compliance, marketing, development, wherever it is, coach. We all should really share the same why. The why is always centered around how we can create the best experience for the student athletes we're responsible for mentoring. And you can do it through a lot of different avenues. I was just thinking career. What's my next step? What's my next title? All of that, maybe even, how much money I could make, even though we didn't make much money, as you know, Gene,
That's for sure.
jobs. But, back then, if you're starting out making $12,000, and if you got to $13,000, you thought you hit the jackpot, So, but the point is it's the why. It's the why you're in this profession. It's the why you have your role. And it's the why that really propels you to get, what I think the most intrinsic reward out of the role you have. And that's why I don't even use the word job, because if you really dive in to what you are doing in this world, it's the why. And so you're really playing a role that doesn't feel like a job. And so that would be, when I was thinking back, I wish I would have known about the why a little earlier. But it took me a little bit of time, but fortunately not too long.
Joe, it didn't take you very long at all. You're being very modest. Joe, you've been a terrific leader, both at Missouri, at Oklahoma. You've been president of the 1A Directors of Athletics. You've been president of NACDA. What are some of the traits and characteristics that make for a great leader?
Integrity, consistency, purpose, and really subordinating one's own personal goals for those that are most important for the people you serve. And so I am really an example of a servant leader. It's not so much how many followers that a leader has, it's more how many people we can develop into leaders themselves and helping them be successful. And I really thought about that, again, when I had that switch flip early in my career. It's not about me. It's never going to be about me. I have a role to play. I have to make decisions. Eugene, you've been in this, this chair. You know what it's like. You have to make decisions. And many times when you make decisions, as much as they are, important for the best interests of the university you serve, they're not always popular, and you have to be comfortable with that.
That's for sure.
Because the bottom line is the people we serve. And if we're making those decisions based on their best interests, we're going to be in the best place in the long run. This wall over my shoulder here that you see the word magic, that would be another important characteristic of any great leader, is to have a set of core values that you have total conviction in upholding. And I have my own personal core values. You do too, but the MAGIC acronym is stands for the core values that we uphold in our athletic program. M is for masterful. A is for accountable. G is for gracious. And I guess I'm hiding the C here. Move over one way or the other. And C is for competitive. We're in Oklahoma. We have to be successful. We have people that have expectations, although some of them are, totally unrealistic at times. But we're at Oklahoma, so we put competitive last because it's the path we follow to be the most successful. There is a defined blueprint that we follow here at Oklahoma to try to create our success. And at the end of the point in time where we get evaluated, we want people to be not only excited about the success that we achieve, but the way we went about creating success, meaning that we do it the right way with class and integrity. So I think it's having great purpose, having great values, and understanding in the bigger picture, you're there to serve others, to help them be at their best.
Yeah. Joe, that is so good. Thank you for sharing that. Being a college football historian, I go back to right after the war when Jim Tatum took over for a year at Oklahoma, followed by Bud Wilkinson, who won 31 consecutive games and then 47 consecutive games. And, he passed it on to Chuck Fairbanks and on to Barry Switzer. When you came to Oklahoma, the success rate that Oklahoma had for the past few years was not like its history at all. What attracted you to an assistant coach at the University of Florida by the name of Bob Stoops, who'd never been a head coach?
Well, there are many attributes that Bob Stoops possessed that attracted me. I had been following his career a little bit. As you know, he played at Iowa for the great Hayden Fry, and then started coaching. He was a GA at Kent State. Then when Bill Snyder, who was on Hayden Fry's staff, got the head coaching position at Kansas State, hired Bob as his assistant, and then his co-defensive coordinator. And so, being in the same conference with Kansas State, I knew about Bob and certainly watched the turnaround of turnarounds occur at Kansas State University under Coach Snyder. So I got to see it a little bit firsthand. I was at Missouri at the time for all of that, and then he left to go to Florida to be defensive coordinator under Coach Spurrier. And so, I really, as an AD, we always track, other people in the business, not knowing if or when we'd be in a position to hire, but we knew sometime it could happen, and sometimes, when you least expect it. So I had Bob on a list, and then when I sat down and started talking, he and I together, and we spent 4 hours probably getting to know each other, talking. We're both very detailed oriented people. So we talked about everything under the sun related to running a program. You have to know at the time I was only here at Oklahoma for about 3.5 to 4 months myself. So I was still learning about Oklahoma. But amongst the many great characteristics that Coach Stoops had was that he understood the big picture. For a young coach who had not been a head coach, he understood the bigger picture, and he knew, that he was going to bring a blueprint that would be able to be put in front of his current players and get them to buy in as quickly as they could, as well as those that he was going to recruit in the future, and they would relate to their parent or guardian. I knew that he was going to put together a great staff, which he did. And then there's, those intangibles that you can't always measure, but you can sense. And I think one of those was the confidence. You could see how confident a person he was. He's not arrogant. He, in fact, is a very humble guy. But he has a way about him that it's not only confidence in his ability, but I could see how he could transfer that confidence to the people around him. And sure enough, that happened. He just had the it factor, if you will. And sometimes when people would hear him talk, they thought maybe he was a little arrogant. And I that was quite the opposite. He was a guy that put everybody else first. He never made any excuses. He owned it when things didn't go well. But as you know, he never had a losing season at Oklahoma. His first year, he won 7 games. He never won less than 8 games in his career. Won 10 championships, won a national championship, was in 4 national championship games. And, with Bob, and he said this in his introductory press conference, when success comes, and he sort of just put that mind, planted that seed right away. When success comes, it's going to be about the collective efforts of everybody else, not him. And he operated with that mantra his entire time. And I think in a lot of ways, that cemented what we were putting in place for all of our programs in terms of our blueprint. And obviously when we hired Lincoln Riley and got to watch him, under Coach Stoops for those 3 years, you could see similar characteristics. And then, Coach Stoops decides it's time for him to retire. And obviously Lincoln being here, it made it a smart choice, not an easy choice, the smart choice, the wise choice to hire him as our next head coach.
Great. Joe, what are some of the more rewarding things that you have experienced in being at Missouri and at Oklahoma?
Being around student athletes has to be at the top. It's always fun to celebrate success, to see them win big games, especially games when very few but themselves thought winning that game was possible. And then obviously winning championships, winning national championships, the culmination of their hard work. But it's the journey with them that is probably the most rewarding, Gene, and gives the greatest perspective, because you get to know them on a different level. The path they've traveled to get here. The challenges that they've overcome, to be successful in their sport. And then when you see them have success, to the people that watch them at that moment, they may think that they've just been great and perfect and make it look easy, and it's been that way for them the entire time. And you realize, all the different challenges, the ups and downs, maybe even times when they thought they'd walk away from their sport, but they stuck with it. I think that kind of process where they see things in themselves, and maybe, Gene, as you know, because you've been in coaching, as well. The greatest coaches see something in their players or their student athletes that sometimes the student athletes don't yet see for themselves. And the greatest teachers find a way to help them understand that. And then you see that epiphany or that light bulb go on, and then you see where it goes from there. Those are my greatest moments, to be able to watch those processes. And so when you win, you haven't been practicing winning. You've been practicing doing the right things that help you win or be successful. And then they come to the point where you make it happen. And, we've won a lot of championships here, but we've also, got to that point. We've had 3 runner-up finishes already this year, and you're like, you're right there trying to win one, and like, oh, and here we are playing, as we're taping this, we're playing for another national championship, and hopefully we can win that. But you ride that with them and help create the perspective for student athletes that they could carry with them the rest of their lives, so they have that transferable quality that they developed here on campus that will apply to whatever they choose to do in their life. But the best part of it too has been to enjoy it with my own family, my 2 sons and my wife. We've really had the ride of a lifetime being part of the lives of so many people.
You sure have. Those are lucky student athletes to be at the University of Oklahoma. That's for sure. Joe, I consider 3 people to be the fathers of intercollegiate athletic marketing: Don Canham, Russ Potts, and Joe Castiglione. There's a lot of young people out here that are listening and don't realize that college marketing and the marketing of college athletics is not very old. In fact, it's fairly new. Talk about some of the things that you did early on that nobody or very few people were doing, and then some of the things that you're doing now at Oklahoma that you shared with me that are really at the top of the heap.
Well, Gene, I have a quick response when you put me in the category of the first 2. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
Oh, yes, you are, my friend. Yes, you are.
The 2 you mentioned were actually the 2 that I would point at as being huge influencers in my life. Obviously, I got to work for Russ as a student at the University of Maryland, but I told Don Canham many times that he was a role model in a kind of a, out-of-town mentor to me when he didn't even realize it. But the other person, too, that I would put in that category, who I got to work for, who hired me at the University of Missouri, was Dave Hart Sr. We all know our great mutual friend, Dave Hart Jr., and then his son, Rick, who was the athletic director at SMU. But Dave Hart Sr. hired me at Missouri, and it was the place where I think, my career really took off. We're doing different things. I mean, I think about, having to do things with no resources at Rice and Georgetown and early on, at Missouri, because people didn't understand the whole world of marketing. But that actually was part of the great characteristics of being successful in marketing itself is, you don't always get things handed to you. You have to go out and figure out creative, innovative ways to make things happen, and without any money. So you have to go out.
That's right.
It's almost like to be successful in marketing, you have to be an entrepreneur first, because you have to create some type of capital. If it's cash, if it's trade, if it's you're something that you're using as collateral that you can exchange to make something else happen. And that's actually in the sense of marketing what it's all about. You're trying to facilitate a process to create top of the mind awareness, to create a hook to get people interested, and then most importantly, something that calls them to action and engages them. And at its basic core, that's what it is. But it can take the forms of so many different things. And the biggest thing, especially in college athletics, still today, Gene, is getting people in seats and keeping them in their seats. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have today. And I worked at places, where we didn't have winning football programs, and it was hard to get people into a stands, or, sometimes when programs are struggling. And you have to find creative ways. And the big buzz phrases in today's world are fan engagement and activation. And so that's where, they're probably moving away from calling it marketing and promotion to all the different other new buzzwords. But you have to connect. John Maxwell, the great author, wrote a book, and I love this title of this book. I love the book more, but he wrote a book that everybody communicates, but few connect. And in marketing, the key is to connect. And back then, Gene, we didn't know as much as we know now. We didn't have a lot of data to utilize, to be very targeted. I mean, we could talk about ratings as they had them for radio and television or newspapers, or, that you could build off, but those were more generic back then. You're trying to hit a broader audience, and because you didn't have a lot of money to work with, sometimes you had to go more of a shotgun approach and hit, broad, hoping that some of it would hit, and now it's almost surgical strikes you can do with, everything that we have at our fingertips that technology has and continues to provide. And I think right now is the most important thing is things have to be relatable across so many different platforms that people have available to them. The traditional ones, as well as how people are spending their time. And I have it right here in front of me, but a lot of them are on this device. And that those devices have gotten so good that even computers, that they might use, in their office, they don't use them as much because everything can be done on one's phone. They're watching programs. Now you go to events, games, there are interactive ways that people can engage while they're sitting there. It's not just, just sitting there and watching the game by itself. There are second screen, third screen options. There are activities you can do. Every great venue now has created good connectivity. So you have, good high-speed Wi-Fi. A lot of times people are not just interested in their own world of what's going on in the game. They want to know what's going on with everybody else at the game. Their friends are over here, they're over there, they're texting, they're sending pictures, they're snapping, shots of them, they're going out on Instagram, Snapchat, all the different platforms. They're getting content that they want to use in some other different way. And so you have to facilitate that. And the experience, people don't have a lot of time. So you must think about the time that they invest in coming is so valuable. I mean, that's a commodity. And we're having to think about ways that, just get them to the stadium in a great frame of mind and efficiently get them into the stadium and what they can do when they're in the stadium. So standing in long lines at concession stands, not anymore. You order your concessions, on your phone before you get there. It's paid for. You just walk up to a line and you have your takeout and it's ready to go. I mean, we figured out you could drive up to a grocery store or a store and they could come out and put food in your car, or your items that you buy. Why couldn't we do that at concession stands? So during the pandemic, that was something we perfected last year. And people are like, wow, I didn't miss hardly any of the game, So we don't have the in-seat delivery yet, but that will be the next iteration where, somebody will order their concessions. They'll get them. And then it's like an in-stadium DoorDash or Grubhub or, Postmates or whatever you call those, where you just get it brought to your seat. You got to think about those ways that facilitate people's enjoyment, and then keep them connected in days between those events. People get distracted because there's too many options right now, and you've got to keep them focused on coming to your events. Everybody talks about the TV, Gene, and as the biggest competitor, and it is. That they've got bigger screens, better resolution. It's amazing, but they can't replicate game day, and that's why places like Oklahoma, game day is still huge. There's a lot of game day that you get for free. It doesn't cost you one dime. They're just sensory overload opportunities here that you come, and now we're getting out of a pandemic where we can be around people again, and you have activities before and during the game and after the game. It's a whole day event. And I think that is part of, what we need to protect in the long run. But make it, where people know that they can go and enjoy it, and make it happen on their own time. And then between times, there are ways to keep connected, and we're going to keep using technology to our benefit.
Joe, about the future, as far as television goes, and as far as new contracts for different conferences that'll be coming up in the next 2, 3, 4 years, I don't think anybody knows exactly where things will go, but do you see new networks coming forward? Do you see Netflix getting involved, maybe Amazon getting involved, along with the ESPNs and the Foxes of the world? Do you see new people coming into college athletics that will help to continue to elevate the dollars that come from the television networks?
Gene, I believe that live event content is still king, and there'll always be very competitive market forces trying to make sure that they either hold on to it or acquire it, if it provides them that type of vehicle to connect the rest of their business. And that's the way we have to think about it. I think Amazon's step into the live sports world with their new deal with the NFL is possibly indicative of what others might try to do. But we don't know yet, as you said. One would tend to think that there'll be a Google, an Apple TV, a YouTube, a Netflix, somebody else see the value of live sports in what they're trying to achieve. But the traditional media companies, CBS, NBC, obviously ESPN, ABC, Fox, they're not necessarily going to just step aside and let them, get access to it when that's still a huge part of what drives their network operations. I think the biggest change that we're seeing right now is the transition from traditional cable or linear distribution to digital, and the streaming services that we see, those that we just mentioned, and or companies that have created new streaming services, are really just new delivery systems, because consumers have heretofore grown with cable. As it started off, I remember if you got 30 channels, you're like, wow, we have 30 channels. And I can remember when we were growing up, we had 3,
Right. I remember the 3 channels. That's right. That shows our age.
Yeah. Well, then you get 30, then you get 50, then you get 100, then you get 250. And like, everybody's like, the more the better. But then they realized they were paying for all of that, and they weren't watching all of that. And, over time, they started to see the cost of their cable bill go up and up and up. And to a point where, easily people were spending $250, $300 a month on a cable bill. And most of it was paying for channels they didn't watch. So they started trying to do skinnier packages and over the top and different pay programs, and now they're realizing that people want very specific content, so you can just buy what you want and watch it on these streaming services. And so I think now at the moment they're more affordable because they're getting people to sign up, but in time the more that they get on the streaming services, the more the monthly subscriber fees or yearly subscriber fees will go up. And so it's just transitioning the consumer to a new distribution system and allowing them to have basically appointment television where they can watch anything they want whenever they want, because even the programs that are live, if they miss those, are archived or put on a recorded system where they can go back and watch them when they want. And that's what the new world is. And so I think that this is part technology moving our consumer base to a different place, and then the insatiable appetite that sports fans have for sports themselves. Now there's more competition out there, of course, but I think in the terms of college, I believe that there's still huge market, and probably more than ever before, you've got fan bases that want to connect with their favorite teams, and so they're finding a way to do it. I think the economy will have had some impact on us going forward, but I do believe there's still going to be a very robust environment for bidding, and we've already seen it start to take shape with the NFL rights.
Yeah, well said. Joe, of all of my friends and colleagues in intercollegiate athletics, you've done as good a job as anybody in balancing a big-time athletic director and a big-time program with your family. How do you do that, and how difficult is it to maintain?
It's extremely difficult, Gene. I don't know that I've done the best job. I can look back and second guess myself like a lot of people might. I did prioritize making sure that I was there for as many of my family events as I could be. Admittedly, I wasn't perfect, but they knew that there were times that it wasn't so much I was choosing work over them, but they knew there's some times where it just was impossible. But the vast majority of the time, I would make sure I was there for all of their events. And that was the one thing I heard from ADs and coaches, over a time I was coming up in the profession, that they regretted. They regretted missing a lot of things that their sons or daughters did. So I wanted to make sure I didn't do that, because we both know you don't get those back. Having a great wife, a great spouse, whatever, is obviously very important. And I give my wife a great deal of credit, because, we talked about this, early on in our relationship, that there was going to have to be, some probably some moments where she has to carry the load at home, because of whatever demands there were placed on me in my job. No different than any other career path. My wife didn't get the, sort of the lead up to be an AD's wife, like a coach's wife or an AD's wife of others that we know in the profession do, where you're taking this job and moving here, moving there. I mean, I was actually an athletic director when I got married. So she had met me we had met maybe 6-8 months before I became an AD. So she got a very short time period to understand it. And so I give her all the credit in the world. I couldn't love her more and appreciate her more than I do for being not only a great wife, but the best mom to 2 boys. And, my sons, to talk about them, I would involve them. We had many lunches or dinners going to various events where you said of wrestling or volleyball or soccer or baseball, softball, whatever. I mean, obviously they went to basketball and football games, but sometimes we'd just get dinner and sit up in the stands and eat our dinner while we're watching the game, because that had to find a time to do it. I was able to coach my son's teams a little bit, so that was fun when they were playing football. But I also had some crazy times when I was trying to hire coaches, and I'd go to my son's baseball game and I'd be out in the outfield way away from everybody doing a job interview with a prospective candidate, because it was the only time you could catch somebody, and
Sure.
As much as you say, I'm going to schedule it here or there, but sometimes there just isn't any other choice. So, so many of those kinds of experiences, I think, we're part of that. And I talk to my sons about that. And, you've been through this too, Gene. They grow up in a world where their father is not because we seek any kind of attention or visibility, but our job just requires it to a point. And they have to live through the comments that people make about their father, and especially having the last name. People it's not like we have a common name of Smith, Brown, or Jones. They pretty well stands out. And they go through things that we would talk about, and I think it's important to have really good communication. And then you remember how your kids, they pick up things. And I remember one day I was sitting in my office, and my son was 5 years old, and he called me, and my assistant comes in and says, "Little Joe's on the phone." And I said, "Really?" And I thought something was wrong at home. And he got on there and proceeded to tell me that he was interested in getting this new golf bag to learn how to play golf. And he was running a capital campaign and wanted to know if I would contribute to it. A capital campaign. So you don't know where, I must have been on the phone talking to a prospective donor at home, and he overheard this. I don't know where he picked it up, but just those kinds of moments. And,
it makes sense. When you wanted to build new facilities, you ran a capital campaign. On golf clubs, he's gonna hold a capital campaign.
But the same kind of things that you and I are talking about here about ourselves or administrators or athletic directors, I talk about the exact same thing to coaches. And I think that's part of what helps us retain coaches here, is that we do talk about the importance of having a quality of life along with being in a high profile position. I mean, sure, contract and compensation, all of that has something to do with retention. Their success has something to do with retention, but there's reasons why coaches come to a place and stay for a long period of time. And I think one of the characteristics of our success here at Oklahoma has been continuity, because every year I get ADs from other schools calling about, one coach of this sport or that sport, trying to hire them. And, at some point, we know what the market is and the market forces and how much we can afford. But if you want the total package where the culture, and that is, I talked about this earlier in our interview, the culture that we have here is truly part of the blueprint of our success. And without, investing in the culture day after day, you just don't get it to happen. But the culture of having that balance between pursuing championships and excellence in every level, what we preach to our student athletes, that they can complete their degree and grow as a person as well as develop, in their sport, the culture that's around them, that's inclusive and respectful and, looks out for their best interests. Those things matter. And, it's a reason why you were able to keep a Bob Stoops for 18 years. I mean, he could have been anywhere, at any pro team, at any college team he wanted. But he chose to, in this case, have his entire career at Oklahoma. I mean, that's like, we don't take that for granted. That's super special. And, we've had coaches, just had two legends retire. Sherry Cole was here for 25 years, a Hall of Fame coach. Lon Kruger, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame, has done an amazing job at one of the only coaches in the history of the sport to take 5 programs to NCAA tournaments. He's been to Final Fours. I mean, and he just do it the right way. But they come to Oklahoma and they see that you can be successful, you could be passionate, but there's a quality of life. And I think those are the kinds of things that you talk to young people, is never lose sight of that balance, because it's, we could talk about physical fitness, but the quality of work-life balance is also part of your mental fitness. And that helps you be better leader, more successful, have the endurance that people around you can feed off of and help, shape their path to success.
When we came up, it was who's going to outwork who, and not family and this, and that, and the other thing. But you're right. You've created a culture at Oklahoma where people want to stay. And, that's important.
It's important that, you can see that, our softball coach is one of the greatest of all time. And she's been here 25 years, 26 years. And she's not, look at where she is. I mean, she's had a -- 1 team this year. So you can see where people stay invigorated, refreshed, energized. Because you're always, we never feel like we've got it all figured out. It's always about the continuous improvement and how we can get better and stay on the cutting edge.
We've been very fortunate to have one of the top leaders in all of intercollegiate athletics, and certainly one of the best athletic directors in the country. Joe Castiglione, thank you so much for your time. The lessons that you have learned and passed down, and the mentoring that you have provided to young people, we are a much, much better profession because of you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you making time to be with us, and we'll be in touch soon.
Well, thank you, Gene. And I want to thank you for really, which is most of my lifelong friendship. You have been not just a great colleague, but a great friend. And I'm a better person for having Gene DeFilippo in my life. So thank you for all you've done and for me along the way as a great friend, and being there still today.
Thanks, Joe. We're out of time on this week's On the Fly College Edition. I'm your host, Gene DeFilippo. Thanks for your time this time, and we'll see you next time.